people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. A bit of clarity on what's going on with Subriel Matias as a result of his adverse finding. Veteran boxing scribe Mike Coppinger stated late yesterday that Subriel Matias versus Dalton Smith's fight could proceed on January 10th as planned, pending review and further testing of WBC champion Subriel Matias. The New York Commission said in a statement to Ring Magazine, Matias delivered an adverse analytical finding on November 9th following a VADA test, but his Osterin level at 0.085 nanograms was below the threshold of 0.1. The statement reads, the New York State Athletic Commission is aware that Mr. Matias, who is currently licensed, has received an adverse analytical finding from VADA concerning an out-of-competition test. The reported concentration was below the applicable threshold, used by multiple jurisdictions including Nevada, California, and New York, where most of the boxing matches in the United States happen. In accordance with Commission regulations, all licenses must comply with any medical examinations and laboratory testing required by the Commission, and the results of out-of-competition testing administered by VADA are appropriately considered when determining fitness to compete in New York State. Mr. Matias has been cooperative with the Commission thus far regarding this matter, and is subject to additional testing and review. So what if they're testing Subriel Matias right now and the piss comes back clean? What does that mean? Theoretically, that could absolve him of any wrongdoing and allow the contest to go on if recent urinalysis shows there's no banned substance in his system, or at least not a qualifiable amount. The official statement continues, the Commission is closely monitoring the situation, will review the results of all additional ongoing testing, and is in communication with relevant parties regarding the VADA report. As the matter is under review, no further comment will be made by the Commission at this time. But isn't Osterin the same banned substance that Ryan Garcia tested positive for and was subsequently suspended for? Yes, it was, but where the amount they found in Subriel Matias was below the legal threshold, Ryan Garcia's was well above, at 6 nanograms per milliliter, 60 times the New York State Athletic Commission's allowable limit. The nuance here is that the New York State Athletic Commission deems Osterin a quantifiable substance and not just a qualifiable substance, meaning how much they find in your system matters, and that might determine how they choose to proceed.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either, which might explain why this contest could be allowed to go on. Mike Coppinger continued, the WBC will figure into this also, as it announced last week that an investigation is underway. So the WBC and New York State Athletic Commission are both reviewing the matter. This is a mandatory title fight, so only will proceed if the WBC approves it as well. An added tidbit, Mike said the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, does not allow for any threshold for Osterin. It's classified as a non-threshold substance, so any detectable amount triggers an adverse analytical finding. That is WADA, not to be confused with VADA. Even though VADA borrows a lot of their protocols from WADA, they're not identical. Best highlighted in the case of Oscar Valdez back in 2021, where he tested positive for phentermine. In spite of the adverse finding, his fight with Robson Conceição was allowed to proceed as planned because the local sanctioning body, the Pascua Yaqui Tribe Athletic Commission, adhered to WADA guidelines, which at the time only banned phentermine during in-competition periods. VADA's rules, comparatively, when it came to that substance, were more stringent than WADA's, and make no distinction between in-competition and out-of-competition testing for a substance.
That was a word sandwich. What are you really trying to say?
That even though VADA borrows a lot from WADA, there are subtle differences and nuances in between the two. That was evident in the case of Oscar Valdez, and I believe that is evident in the case of Subriel Matias. here and now when it comes to Osterin.
VADA treats Osterin as a quantifiable substance, where WADA treats Osterin as a qualifiable substance. The difference between the two: to VADA, it matters how much they find. To WADA, it doesn't matter how much they find, a lot or a little.
Whatever amount is there triggers an adverse analytical finding, an important detail not to be ignored. So, because of this nuance, the contest might be allowed to go on, and Subriel Matias might get to keep his title after all. I wasn't actually aware that the New York State Athletic Commission and VADA jointly viewed Osterin as a quantifiable substance. That's a major detail.
Ticket sales for the shit was still pretty low, though. They've only got a month.
As much as I like pressure fighters, and as much as I like to see Subriel Matias go to work, he is not yet a big draw. And when last I checked, tickets for the event were not moving, and the fight being in jeopardy like this, that definitely can't be helping ticket sales, not knowing whether or not the fight is going to happen. They have to try to sew this up in a matter of days, so that at minimum, they can have all of December to promote the fight and try to sell it. All of December and some small portion of January. That is a best-case scenario, but as stated, it looks like the contest might be allowed to go on, and Subriel might get to keep his belt, unless Dalton Smith takes it from him.
Outside of Josh Taylor, he's moving up. Is there a dream fight at 140 that you like, yo, I got to see this guy before I lead the division?
I think me and Gary Russell is going to be the biggest fight in that division. I think when me and Gary get the belt and we unify, I think that's going to be a big fight. I think the run back from the losers, I think a lot of people are going to want to see that just because we have history. And I feel like we the most, I want to say that I don't really, I'm not saying I know the whole 140 division, but I feel like me and Gary is the most talented. From what I know, I think me and Gary is the most talented in that division.
WBA champion Gary Antuanne-Russell posted that video interview with Hitchins with a caption that reads, he said it, "Be a man of your word, Richie."
I guess now, Gary Antuanne-Russell is gunning for a unification match with IBF champion Hitchins on the heels of the Andy Hirioka fight's collapse. That fight was supposed to happen on the undercard of Gervonta Davis versus Jake Paul, but we all know that that fight got scrapped, and so it would seem that the Andy Hirioka fight got scrapped with it. Was Gary's fight happening on that card conditional upon Gervonta Davis's participation? Was it a packaged deal? Because some of the undercard fights have already been announced for Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua, but Antuanne-Russell versus Hirioka was not one among them.
And who is supposed to put up the money for a Gary Antuanne-Russell versus Hitchins unification match when Hitchins is a free agent?
PBC, I guess.
Friend to the channel, Mr. Yellow, highlighted this when he said Africa's plan to leave Eddie to work directly with Turkey went straight to shit. His best bet is to see if he can make something shake with Gary Antuanne-Russell and his team, but on whose dollar?
PBC's, I guess.
Except the PBC were not the ones paying for the Gary Antuanne-Russell versus Andy Hirioka fight. MVP and Netflix were the ones bankrolling that, so...
I mean, the PBC are the ones paying for Yanni Bekalam-Kanalai versus Arislandi Lara, so maybe they could pay for Hitchins versus Gary Antuanne-Russell? Maybe. Bill it as a pay-per-view. Can't be a standalone pay-per-view. It can't be those two in the main event, as neither Hitchins or Gary Antuanne-Russell are all that big a draw to where they can headline a main event and sell it as a pay-per-view. It would have to be on the undercard of something bigger, but what big fights do the PBC have to put together all on their own? All by themselves?
Beats the shit out of me. There's nobody over there. Gervonta Davis is all tied up with his legal troubles. David Benavidez is in bed with Golden Boy now. Those were their two flagship fighters, the biggest names at the PBC, and if they're both otherwise preoccupied, what big fight can the PBC put together so that you can put this fight on that fight's undercard? Common denominator between fighters who decided to leave Matchroom for greener pastures is Keith Connolly. He manages both Richardson Hitchins and Edgar Berlanga, and just like Mr. Yellow said, it was Richardson Hitchins' plan to leave Eddie Hearn to work directly with Turkey, except that plan went straight to shit.
Edgar Berlanga must have had something similar in mind, and they must have got that idea jointly from Keith Connolly, who I guess wanted to funnel his fighters that he manages away from Matchroom, somewhere where they might pay them more.
You wanted to cut Matchroom out of the picture, it seems, and in doing so, your fighters have been left in limbo. Richardson Hitchins hasn't fought since what was his final fight at Matchroom, and Edgar is still on the rebound after having been knocked out by Hamza Shiraz.
You wanted to cut Matchroom out of the picture where, if you were still with them, Matchroom could have paid for Hitchins versus Antuanne-Russell. They could have put that fight together if that's what Richardson Hitchins wanted and if he were still over there, but he chose free agency. So go be free.
And while you're free, see if anybody out there wants to pay you more than Matchroom was paying you, because so far, it's slim pickings.
He's an ingrate.
Most of these fighters are. Matchroom provided Richardson Hitchins with all the traction and stability that he was not getting at Mayweather Promotions. They gave him a regular schedule of fights, put the money in his pocket, more money than he ever made, and guided him to the IBF title. And this is how he thanked them.
A fucking ingrate. But can't he just go back to Matchroom?
That depends if Matchroom wants to have him. I think that if he wouldn't have went about things the way that he did, they would have renewed his contract. But because you sort of gave them the cold shoulder and tried to cut them out of the picture, maybe they don't want to take you back. Maybe they give you the energy that you just gave them. And maybe going back to Matchroom isn't an option. It's up to them, ultimately.
It's up to Matchroom.
He's still IBF champion, Richardson Hitchins, and he is not at liberty to just drop that title to move up to welter in pursuit of bigger fights.
Not without consequences.
There are bigger names at 147 right now than 140, but none of those bigger names would give Richardson Hitchins the time of day, as they have bigger fish to fry. So he has to stay IBF champion to stay relevant.
To any extent.
He doesn't have the kind of marquee value to where he can afford to just drop his IBF title and move up in pursuit of bigger names. That IBF title is the only thing keeping him even talked about.
Without that, he's got no marquee value, no bargaining chip, no nothing.
It does seem like Gary Antuanne-Russell is willing to fight him, willing to unify titles with him, but the financials appear to be a hurdle. There's no such thing as a free lunch. You want to make a fight? Somebody has to pay to make it happen. If somebody does, I lean towards Gary Antuanne-Russell to win the fight, best described as a big pressure guy. Fight between him and Gary Antuanne-Russell might look something like the Alberto Puello fight that Gary Antuanne-Russell lost by the narrowest of margins. Fight between them for Richardson Hitchins might look something like the Gustavo Lemos fight that he won by the narrowest of margins.
Won? Shit, a lot of people thought he lost.
And that's the point. I don't think that Richardson Hitchins is as durable as Alberto Puello was in the Gary Antuanne-Russell fight. I don't think he's as durable as Alberto. I don't think he punches as hard as Alberto. And I know that he doesn't throw as many punches per round as Alberto. Alberto, in spite of being a pure boxer, engages a bit more than Richardson Hitchins.
Dumb it down for me, will you?
Gary Antuanne-Russell fought Puello, and Puello has the same base style as Hitchins, but in my purview, Hitchins is more beatable. I think Gary Antuanne-Russell overwhelms Richardson Hitchins. I think he beats him.
If Gustavo Lemos turned out to be a nightmare for Richardson Hitchins, if that guy was almost too much to handle, just imagine a bigger, stronger guy with the same base style. Gary Antuanne-Russell. I think Gary beats Hitchins.
Making a long story short, for that to happen, somebody's got to make the fight, and to make the fight, somebody has to pay for it. So who's going to pay for Gary Antuanne-Russell versus Richardson Hitchins? We'll have to wait and see.
In men's welterweight news, Bill Haney, the father of Devin Haney, on the heels of his big win over Brian Gore-Tex, is now advocating for a Rolly Romero unification match.
Bill proposes that the fight happen in February of next year, asking who wants to see it.
Not me.
Well, somebody should have told Bill that up until recently, Rolly was planning on defending his title against Manny Pacquiao, but those plans were dashed after an order from the WBA came down ordering him to fight Shakram Giyasov, and we haven't heard much since then.
When did the order come down?
Earlier this month on the 13th, starting the 30-day negotiation period, to where if next month gets here and a deal is not yet reached, it's gonna go to a purse bid. And if it goes to a purse bid, you can expect Matchroom to bid on that fight to either force Rolly to defend his title against their guy or to force him to vacate the title so they get a new champion.
They've already got Lewis Crocker over there holding the IBF. If Shakram Giyasov were to acquire the WBA, that makes 2.
And that's what Rolly Romero has going on while Bill Haney is calling for a fight between him and his son, saying, Ryan Garcia lost to Rolly on May 20th. Now he's fighting Barrios in February. Rolly hasn't fought since May, and Devin just became champion at the same weight. So why wait on Ryan again? Devin can fight Rolly now. Same day, same card, unification, true or false?
The other kerfuddle. Who says that Rolly Romero even wants to fight Devin Haney? Who says that Rolly would entertain that? He wanted to fight Old Man Pacquiao. That was his focus up until that order from the WBA came down, forcing him to oblige Shakram Giyasov. So, the way I see it, if you have to choose between fighting a hot potato in Giyasov or a more known fighter, a champion in Devin Haney, out of those two, Devin would be the more desirable choice, as you stand to make more money fighting Devin than fighting Shakram.
If you fight Giyasov, it's likely on Matchroom's dime. Whereas if you fight Devin, that might be on Turkey's dime, and we all know Turkey pays above market value.
In the buildup of what was the Brian Norman fight, Brian Norman Sr. said that Turkey LL Sheik offered Devin a 3-fight deal in the neighborhood of $36 million in total.
What the fuck? Go, Bevan!
If Shakram Giyasov painted you into a corner, one way out of it is unifying titles with Devin, as that would pay more, and unifying titles might allow you to circumvent the mandatory. Still gotta pay him to step aside, and then you still have to hope that he's willing.
I think for a brief moment there, given how Devin looked in the Ryan Garcia fight and how scared he fought in the Jose Ramirez fight, it was questionable as to whether or not you could favor him to beat the likes of Rolly Romero. But now, having done what he did in the Brian Norman fight, redeeming himself,
Albeit in very boring fashion.
you can go back to favoring Devin Haney to beat the likes of a Rolly Romero, even if he's not the biggest puncher or not the most exciting fighter to watch. What he proved in the Norman fight is that he can disarm a big puncher. And what is Rolly if not a big puncher?
Power is all he's got going for him. He ain't got no boxing brain. He's not a boxer's boxer.
Rolly at his best is a power guy.
And Devin just proved that he's still got it. Enough of it to disarm a power guy. Like a Brian Norman, like a Rolly Romero. Now, I have serious reservations about the current state at welterweight and who the belt holders are, that this is by and large the weakest era of welterweights I've ever seen, so I can only give Devin so much credit for beating a Rolly if he does beat him.
If they do fight.
Yeah, Rolly sucks. Sucks pretty bad. But it is a unification match at what is Devin Haney's third weight. It is a step in the direction of undisputed, and he is doing what you want fighters to do.
Champions. You want champions to pursue other champions. You want them to fight for undisputed. That's what he's doing, it looks like.